What you are about to witness is, perhaps, the most chilling lighthouse mystery in recorded history. It took place in the year 1900 on one of the remote Flannan Isles, off the jagged coast of Scotland. There, standing against the brutal wrath of the North Atlantic Ocean, was the Eilean Mor lighthouse. It was a magnificent fortress of solid stone, designed to withstand the end of the world, and it was manned by 3 hardened veteran seamen. But when a relief ship arrived on the day after Christmas, the crew found the island completely dead. The massive light was out, the welcoming flag was gone. The island responded to their calls with absolute terrifying silence. When a lone rescue worker finally climbed the cliffs and broke into the living quarters, he found a scene that defied all logic. The fireplace was freezing cold. A single wooden chair was violently overturned. The giant clock on the wall had completely stopped. The 3 iron men who guarded the tower had vanished into thin air. But the heavy, waterproof storm coats they would absolutely need to survive outside were still hanging perfectly on their pegs, and the heavy iron door of the lighthouse had been locked from the inside. How does a locked room mystery happen on an abandoned island in the middle of the ocean? To understand the sheer dread of this locked room mystery, you must first understand the ground on which it took place. For centuries, local Scottish shepherds and sailors refused to spend the night on Eilean Mor. In the ancient Celtic folklore of the region, the Flannan Isles were known as the Phantom Isles. They were considered a cursed, unholy place. Shepherds would occasionally bring their sheep to graze on the island's rich grass during the day, but they would always perform bizarre pagan rituals to ward off evil spirits. They would absolutely never stay after the sun went down. They believed the island did not belong to the world of the living. But at the dawn of the 20th century, the Northern Lighthouse Board decided to conquer that darkness. They were men of science, engineering, and steel. They didn't believe in ghosts. They constructed a magnificent 75-foot lighthouse at the highest point of the island. It was an absolute fortress. The walls were made of solid stone, designed to withstand the most catastrophic oceanic storms imaginable. To man this fortress, the board did not send rookies. They sent Iron Men. The principal keeper was James Ducat, a veteran with over 20 years of experience managing lighthouses in brutal conditions. The second assistant was Thomas Marshall, another highly experienced sailor who knew the unpredictable wrath of the North Atlantic better than anyone. And the third assistant was Donald MacArthur. MacArthur was a legend in the local coastal towns. He was a hardened, tough-as-nails seaman, known for his explosive temper and brawling. He was a man who had faced death at sea multiple times and never blinked. He was not the kind of man to cry, and he was certainly not the kind of man to panic. These were the 3 veterans who had seemingly vanished into thin air, leaving their storm coats behind in a locked stone tower. Standing in the freezing, silent entrance hall, the relief keeper, Joseph Moore, realized that these 3 Iron Men wouldn't just run outside in their shirt sleeves unless something apocalyptic had happened. Trembling with a fear he couldn't explain, Moore desperately ran to the main desk and grabbed the keeper's official logbook. He hoped the written records would explain the overturned chair, the missing men, and the locked doors. But when he opened the journal, the ink on the pages revealed a psychological descent into madness that would baffle historians for the next century. When Joseph Moore opened the official logbook of the Eilean Mor lighthouse, he expected to find a logical explanation for the missing men. Perhaps a note about an accident, a broken railing, or a sickness. Instead, what he read chilled him to the bone. The entries were written by Thomas Marshall, the second assistant. Marshall was a rational, experienced sailor, but the words on the page read like the frantic scribblings of a man descending into absolute terror. The bizarre entries began on December 12th. Marshall wrote, "Severe winds, the likes of which I have never seen before in 20 years. James Ducat has been very quiet. Donald MacArthur has been crying." Moore stared at the page in disbelief. Donald MacArthur was a legendary brawler. He was a hardened sea dog who had survived countless hurricanes. The idea of MacArthur breaking down and crying out of fear of a storm was not just unlikely. It was unthinkable. The entries grew darker the next day. December 13th. Storm continued through the night. Wind shifted to the north. Ducat quiet. MacArthur praying. These were 3 iron men of the sea, locked inside a reinforced stone tower sitting 150 feet above the ocean. They were entirely safe from the waves. Yet, according to the logbook, they were paralyzed by fear, reduced to tears and desperate prayers. December 14th. There was no entry. A terrifying day of silence. Then came the final entry, hastily scribbled on the afternoon of December 15th. Storm ended. Sea calm. God is over all. That was the last time anyone heard from the men of Eilean Mor. But the sheer horror of the Flannan Isles mystery is not found in what was written in the logbook. The horror is found when you compare the logbook to reality. When the Northern Lighthouse Board launched a massive investigation into the disappearance, they immediately checked the official weather records from the nearby Scottish mainland and the surrounding islands for the dates of December 12th, 13th, and 14th. The investigators were completely baffled. According to every single meteorological station in the region, there was no storm. On the days that Thomas Marshall wrote about apocalyptic winds, the records showed that the weather around the Flannan Isles was perfectly calm. The skies were relatively clear and the sea was entirely manageable. So, what were the 3 men experiencing? What invisible, terrifying force was battering the lighthouse that only they could see and hear? Were they suffering from a shared psychotic hallucination? Did the isolation of the Phantom Isle finally break their minds? Or was there something else entirely circling the stone tower those 3 days, something that doesn't register on a meteorologist's barometer? The investigation took a darker turn when search parties scoured the exterior of the island. They descended the steep, slippery cliffs to the western landing dock. There, they found absolute devastation. Iron railings that were bolted deep into the solid rock, sitting over 100 feet above the sea level, had been twisted and ripped completely out of the ground. Massive blocks of stone, weighing thousands of pounds, had been displaced and moved up the cliffside. Whatever had hit the island was unimaginably powerful. But again, it made no sense. If a catastrophic event had destroyed the western landing dock, why were the men's coats still hanging perfectly inside the lighthouse? And why was the heavy iron entrance gate locked from the inside? If they ran out in a blind panic, they wouldn't have locked the door behind them. And if they were swept away by a wave, who locked the fortress from within? The board investigators were faced with an impossible puzzle. And as they tried to assemble the pieces, they realized that the ocean is the only serial killer on Earth that never leaves a body behind. For decades, the Northern Lighthouse Board desperately tried to find a logical, scientific explanation for the impossible disappearance on Eilean Mor. They refused to accept the local legends of the Phantom Isles. Eventually, maritime experts proposed a theory. It is the most widely accepted scientific explanation, known as the rogue wave theory. Oceanographers know that under extremely rare conditions, even in relatively calm seas, underwater currents can violently collide and merge, creating a freak anomaly. A massive, unpredictable wall of water that can rise over 100 feet in the air, seemingly out of nowhere. The official theory suggests a timeline of tragic events. On the afternoon of December 15th, Thomas Marshall and Donald MacArthur went down to the western landing dock to secure the heavy iron railings. Because it was a routine task, they left their heavy storm coats inside. Suddenly, a massive rogue wave, rising higher than the cliffs, materialized from the dark water. Back inside the lighthouse, the principal keeper, James Ducat, saw the wave coming through the window. In a blind panic, he overturned his chair, locked the heavy iron door behind him to protect the lighthouse, and sprinted down the 160 stone steps to warn his men. But he was too late. The wall of water slammed into the cliff, tearing the iron railings from the solid rock and sweeping all three iron men into the freezing, crushing abyss of the Atlantic Ocean. It is a terrifying, violent theory, and it perfectly explains the destruction at the dock. But for the seasoned sailors who reviewed the case, the rogue wave theory completely falls apart under the weight of human psychology and the physical evidence. First, James Ducat was a 20-year veteran. He knew that the golden rule of the Lighthouse Board was to never leave the tower unmanned. Furthermore, if he saw a 100-foot wave about to strike the island, running toward the dock would be absolute suicide. Second, the coats. A rogue wave might explain why they were swept away, but it does not explain why three experienced mariners would be outside in the freezing Scottish winter right by the ocean in their shirt sleeves. And finally, the lock. The heavy entrance door was locked from the inside. If Ducat ran out to save his friends, he could not have locked the deadbolt from the inside of the compound. A rogue wave can bend iron and shatter stone, but a rogue wave cannot turn a key from the inside of an empty room. If the science of oceanography cannot explain the locked door and the missing coats, we are forced to return to the terrifying entries in the keeper's logbook. James Ducat has been very quiet. Donald MacArthur has been crying. God is over all. Remember, the meteorological records proved that there was no storm on those days. The sea was calm. What if the storm that broke these iron men was not happening outside the lighthouse, but inside their own minds? The psychological theory suggests that the profound, suffocating isolation of the Phantom Isle triggered a shared psychotic breakdown, a phenomenon known as folie à deux, or madness shared by two or more people. Imagine sitting in a silent stone tower, surrounded by nothing but the black ocean. The locals warned you the island was cursed. The silence becomes deafening. Suddenly, the wind sounds like voices. The darkness outside the thick glass windows feels like it is pressing in on you. You begin to hallucinate a storm that isn't there. The paranoia spreads from one man to the next. The hardened brawler starts to cry. The veteran keeper goes completely silent. Driven by a sheer, inexplicable terror of something they believed was trying to get in, they locked the heavy iron doors from the inside. But what drove them out? Did one of them finally snap, murdering the other two before throwing himself into the sea? Or did the terrifying hallucinations force them to climb to the top of the tower, past the giant light, and throw themselves off the gallery deck, leaving the locked fortress perfectly sealed behind them? We will never know the truth. The Flannan Isles lighthouse still stands today, fully automated. There are no human keepers left on Eilean Mor. The island has been returned to the wind, the sea, and whatever ancient forces the local shepherds feared all those centuries ago. Now, the case file is open to you. When you look at the locked doors, the calm weather records, and the hardened sailors crying over a phantom storm, what do you believe really happened inside that stone tower in 1900? Was it a freak of nature, a psychological breakdown, or did the Phantom Isle finally claim its toll? We highly value your perspective, so please let us know your theories in the comments section below. If you appreciate these deep dives into the world's most chilling classified files and unsolved anomalies, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the Discovery Vault. Your continued support allows us to keep manufacturing these high-quality historical investigations for you. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, some vaults are better left unopened. We will see you inside the next case file.